The FBI estimates there are between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the U.S. at any given time.
The U.S. has seen an unfortunate number of serial killer cases that captivated the U.S. population. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Gary Ridgway, Jeffrey Dahmer, just to name a few. During my research on the serial killer phenomenon, I had the opportunity to learn about a man named Dennis Nilsen, which operated between 1978 and 1983 in North London. I found Dennis to be extremely interesting as he exhibited traits that were very similar to Jeffrey Dahmer and Gary Ridgway, where he interacted with the bodies after death. During Nilsen's 5-year murder spree, he killed nearly 12 people, but with many of his victims unnamed, that number could be much higher. Nilsen's 195 Melrose Avenue home is where he turned his perverted and violent fantasies to reality, killing his first victim, Stephen Holmes, on 12/30/1978. He was only 14 years old and the youngest known victim. According to Nilsen's confession, it was not until morning, as he watched Stephen sleep, he made the decision that Stephen would stay with him over the new year, whether he wanted to or not. Nilsen strangled the young boy unconscious, then killed him by drowning him in a bucket of water. With all of his victims, he spent time with the bodies. He would complete an after-death ritual, which included bathing and clothing the bodies, then keeping them for months in his home. If the bodies were not out on display, like in a chair, they were located under his home's floorboards. Nilsen would go on to kill at least 9 individuals at this Melrose home. As the bodies started to stack up, he devised a plan where he would have bonfires in the property's garden. He would often invite the neighborhood kids over to watch the fire as he slowly burnt dismembered body parts with household trash. Oh, and did I mention no one noticed? In mid-1981, Nilsen's landlord needed to make renovations to his flat and asked him to leave. Nilsen naturally didn't want to leave, but after his landlord offered to pay him €1,000, he decided to move. He was able to secure a new home at 23 Cranley Gardens. At the 23 Cranley Gardens home, Nilsen killed at least 3 individuals. He also had multiple encounters with men that he let go. One such case was 21-year-old Carl Sauter. After drinking heavily with Nilsen, Sauter passed out, only to be woken up with Nilsen over top of him, strangling him, saying, "Stay still." Nilsen had believed that he killed Sauter, but as he sat up the body in the armchair, he realized that there was a little life left and resuscitated Sauter. When Sauter asked what had happened, Nilsen had told him an elaborate story of how he got caught in the zipper of a sleeping bag and Nilsen had saved his life. 2 days later, Nilsen dropped Sauter off at the rail station and they parted ways. As Nilsen continued his murder spree at his new residence, he did not have access to a bonfire area and began running into problems disposing of bodies. So he started to cook the bodies and cut them into small chunks and flushing them down the toilets. Disposing of bodies in this manner caused extreme plumbing issues, and Nilsen himself wrote a letter to the property management complaining, stating, and I quote, "The situation for both himself and the other tenants at the property was intolerable." On February 8, 1983, the property management responded to the complaints of Nilsen and the other tenants. Plumber Michael Catron was the first to find Nilsen's murder victims. The plumber opened a drain cover and found it packed with a flesh-like substance and multiple small bones. He knew immediately something was wrong and contacted his supervisor. The supervisor explained that he would be out in the morning to investigate the substance and not to worry. As the plumber was leaving, Nilsen and another resident stopped the man and inquired what he thought the source of the substance was. A very shaky Catron explained that he thought it looked like human flesh. Nilsen brushed the man off and said it looked to him like someone had been flushing KFC down the drain. The next morning, when the supervisor arrived, the drain had been cleared. Immediately, the plumbers contacted the authorities with their suspicions.
When Nilsen arrived at his home the next day, he was met by some unexpected guests, homicide detectives. The detectives explained that the substance in the drain was indeed human and they knew it originated in his flat. Nilsen said that's awful and denied all involvement. When officers accessed his home, they were met with the distinct odor of rotting flesh. As Nilsen continued to deny his involvement, officers shared a knowing glance and told Nilsen to show them where he hid the body. Nilsen calmly admitted that the remaining body parts were located in a bedroom cupboard. He explained to officers that his story was long, complicated, and should be had at the police station. During the drive to the station, detectives questioned Nilsen if the body parts in his flat came from one or two victims. Nilsen calmly and eerily replied 12 to 13. Detectives were baffled and felt oddly exposed as they realized they were driving with one of their city's most prolific serial killers in an unsecure police vehicle. In Nilsen's confession, he admitted to killing between 12 and 13 men and unsuccessfully attempting to murder at least 7 others. Nilsen explained he found no joy in killing, but worshiped the art and the act of death. In his opinion, the most thrilling part was lifting and being in control of his victims. When asked why he committed these crimes, he simply replied, "I'm hoping you can tell me."
And the dangling element of limp limbs was an expression of his passivity.
So his
These two
passivity.
opposite things. I mean, it was my power and his passivity. The more passive he could be, the more powerful I was.
Unbelievably, in the end, Nilsen was only charged with 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Many of his victims he was not able to tell detectives their names, but he remembered their agonizing deaths in detail. Nilsen was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. Luckily for everybody, this was later changed to life in prison and ensured he would not be released. Finally, at 72 years old, Nilsen died at a York hospital on May 12, 2018. Nilsen was taken to a hospital after complaining about stomach pains, which resulted in surgery. Later, he suffered complications and died from a blood clot. There are both good and bad people in this world, and then there are those that cannot feel anything. Therefore, they are not evil or good. They are nothing. They reach into people's lives hoping to feel something, but all they will ever find is emptiness, darkness, loneliness. Serial killers like Dennis Nilsen live life feeling nothing and destroying everything. Thanks for watching. Check out a few of my other videos, and as always, I appreciate your feedback as I continue to build my channel.